Yeah, there's one.
To connect.
Yeah, you can connect. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 7, Text number 7. Etasmin me manaha vidvan kidyate agyana sankate tat naha paranuda vibho kashmalam manasam mahat etasme mano vidvan khidyate jnana sankate tannah paranuda vibho kashmalam manasam mahat etasmin me mano vidvan khidyate jnana sankate tannah paranuda vibho kashmalam manasam mahat etasmin me mano vidvan khidyate jnana sankate tannah paranuda vibho kashmalam manasam mahat. Please repeat. Mataji. Etasmin, in this, me, my, manaha, mind, vidvan, O learned one, khidyate, is troubling, agyana, nescience, sankate, in distress, tat, therefore, naha, my, paranuda, clear up, vibho, O the great one, kashmalam, illusion, manasam, relating to the mind, mahat, great. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. O great and learned one, my mind is greatly illusioned by the distress of this nescience, and I therefore request you to clear it up. Such mental bewilderment as represented here by Vidura takes place for some living entities, but not for everybody and everyone. For if everyone were bewildered, and there would be no possibility of a solution by higher personalities. I'm going to take the liberty and go on to the next text too, so I'll just read everything myself. Shishuka uvacha saitam shotita kshatrā tatvag jigyasuna munihi pratyaha bhagavach chittaha smayan nivagatas smayaha. Sri Shukadev Goswami said, O King Maitreya, thus being agitated by the inquisitive Vidura, at first seemed astonished. But then he replied to him without hesitation, since he was fully God-conscious. Since the great sage Maitreya was filled with God-consciousness, he had no reason to be astonished at such contradictory questions by Vidura. Therefore, although as a devotee he externally expressed surprise, as if he did not know how to reply to those questions, he immediately became perfectly settled and properly replied to Vidura, Yasmin vigyate sarvam evam vigyatam bhavati. Anyone who is a devotee of the Lord knows about the Lord to some extent, and devotional service to the Lord makes him able to know everything by the grace of the Lord. Although a devotee may apparently express himself to be ignorant, he is full of knowledge in every intricate matter. Om agyanam timirandasya gananjana shalakya chakshur unmilitam yena tasmai shri gurave namaha shri chaitanya manobhishtam stapitam yena bhutali swayam rupa kadah mayam tadat swapadandikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Taparkamalam Shri Guru Vaishnavamsha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Varganatam Vitam Tam Jivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shivishakan Vitamscha. Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagatpate Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostu Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamam Hare Priye Vanshakapatubhyascha Kripasindubhyabcha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavibhyo Namo Namaha. Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Putale Bhaktivedanta Swami Itinamane. Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Putale Bhaktivedanta Swami Itinamane. Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharane Nirvishesha Shunyavari Pashtya Dishtarane. Buddhir Mahadbiri Mafpur Vibor Nirmaya Shiti Yad Amusha Purashaha Bhungti Gunan Shudasha Shutashatmaka Surangashishta Bhagavan Vachamsi Me. So, anyway, there's two texts, I guess, or the translation for both. O great and learned one, my mind is greatly illusioned by the distress of this nescience, and I therefore request you to clear it up. Shukadev Goswami replied, O king, Maitreya, thus being agitated by the inquisitive Vidura, at first seemed astonished, but then he replied to him without hesitation, since he was fully God-conscious. So, Maitreya, or Vidura, has asked a bunch of questions, which we went over, mainly regarding the nature of the soul, and that's dealt with the verse after I just read. I won't so much get into that. I'll just recap. Basically, he's asking about the position of the soul. How is it that the soul... Well, he's asking about the nature of the soul and also about the nature of Brahman. Specifically Bhagavata, the personality of Godhead here. How is it he's the complete spiritual whole, yet he acts. He has no desires, yet he acts. He conducts pastimes. And then how is it that the soul, who is completely pure, how does he become engaged in nescience? And then the soul, who's in contact with Krishna, with contact with the super soul, why are they undergoing distress when the super soul himself doesn't undergo such distress? So these questions are raised, and then Maitreya will reply to this. These questions were troubling Vidura's mind. The word here comes, Kashmalam, he's illusioned by this, but specifically, Kidyate is troubling his mind. He's becoming distressed because of this. And Srila Prabhupada writes in the purport, such mental bereavement is represented here. Vidura represented, Srila Prabhupada uses that word because Vidura wasn't actually bewildered or illusioned by it. He understood these questions, but actually his whole intention in approaching, as we've covered previously, his whole intention in approaching Maitreya was to learn about the pastimes of the Supreme Personality of God that are specifically talked about in the 10th canto. That's why he went. That's why because he approached Uddhava, and Uddhava directed him to Maitreya. He wasn't intending to ask all these questions, but just as a matter of course, they sort of came about. This has been described previously. So he's asking these things. So he's not actually bewildered. That's the point. Just for the sake of, in one sense, for the sake of all living entities, because it's recorded here in the Bhagavatam, he's asking these questions. So, a few points in this first purport. So first thing is that, many things can be said. First thing is that this point I mentioned, that Vidura was stressed due to ignorance. He was feeling distressed. Often we feel the same thing. We don't know something. So generally speaking in life, ignorance, what does that say? Ignorance is bliss, but that's a misquote. Srila Prabhupada quotes the full thing and within his book somewhere. What is it?
To be wise is foolish where ignorance is bliss.
Yeah, exactly. So, so ignorance isn't bliss. It's maybe bliss. Ignorance is bliss insofar as it's complete tamagun. Just as people absorbed in tamagun, it's mentioned in the Bhagavad Gita, they take distress to be happiness. So actually, ignorance is complete suffering, but those who are too covered over by the mode of ignorance, they think it's happiness. It's just like somebody gets intoxicated with just alcohol or something. So somebody's sober, they can immediately understand this person is in a horrible, their state of consciousness is very low. They're acting very, when people become intoxicated like that, they're very stupid. They act very stupid. Their intelligence just goes like that. And people can understand this is a very low, degraded person but for the person who's intoxicated, it feels like pleasure. So they can't understand what is what. So generally, ignorance is a state of suffering, is miserable. And Vidura is representing that, but also for us, when we don't know something, we feel distressed. It's just like somebody asks us something, or like so many things, even in the course of everyday life. We're asked to cook something, we don't know how to cook it, we become distressed because we're ignorant of how to do the proper things. Same thing with spiritual knowledge. In fact, in one sense, that's all a reflection of the original ignorance of our position as Krishna's servant. Everybody has anxiety in this world because of forgetfulness of who they are, because forgetfulness that they're part and parcel of Krishna. It's just like Srila Prabhupada offered the example, a rich man's son. He may be undergoing so much distress in the street, living in the street, begging, or like subsiding day by day. He's undergoing so many difficulties, but actually the root cause of his suffering, what can resolve all of his suffering is if he were to awaken the knowledge, come to the consciousness that he's the son of a rich man and revive that relationship, then he will have no problems. Just that knowledge alone, that knowledge of his relationship with his rich father, that is more valuable than, say, him learning to getting a job, this, that, etc., getting any sort of material, so-called material knowledge like that. So the same way, by removing this ignorance of the soul's ignorance of Krishna, so many things at once become rectified. Srila Prabhupada writes in the Bhagavad Gita, I'm paraphrasing something like that. He says the mind is agitated or distressed for want of an ultimate goal. The mind's always looking for an ultimate goal. We don't so much as, maybe once we come to devotional service, we don't really so much experience this. Maybe a little bit, but you find people in this world, they're very agitated as to what to do, especially people in college. You see, they don't know what they're doing in their life. They're in like a central, how do you say that? A pivotal point in their life, and they don't know what to do. Even once they get out of college, so many people are distressed. Even once they some people are trying to define themselves in terms of a career. Even once they get a career, they're still struggling with an identity, how to define themselves. Often people define themselves or create an image of themselves in terms of their family, is what most people resort to. But then they get divorced, their family leaves them, their family dies due to so many different reasons. Accidents, this and that. So many distressful conditions come about from that. People are in such anxiety because of this lack of knowledge of who they are. Once you come to Krishna consciousness and you can understand you have a relationship with Krishna, then immediately all these anxieties, all this self-searching, it just comes to an end immediately. It's just like you you speak with these sort of pseudo-spiritualists, and they have some sort of idea that, or maybe they don't actually, of that, what is the self, who I am everything, I am nothing. Really, they're just in a great amount of anxiety because they don't have any practical knowledge. They may have something theoretical, but they don't have anything tangible. So Krishna consciousness, by giving us this tangible philosophy, it immediately satisfies the mind. It immediately, even if we're not realized right away, immediately it becomes very pacifying. So, it's the duty of the spiritual master, specifically, the spiritual master imparts this knowledge. The spiritual master has greater knowledge than the general people, than a conditioned soul, obviously. Generally, just like I was reading something yesterday about my spiritual master, he was writing something like, preaching means somebody who is more advanced is giving knowledge than somebody who's less advanced. So that's corroborated here, that this isn't possible. Such mental bewilderment takes place for some living entities, but not for everybody. For if everybody was bewildered, there would be no possibility of a solution by higher personalities. It's a funny purport. It seems like something obvious. Obviously, some people are more educated than others. Otherwise, how would they be able to educate people? But there's some sort of idea that floats around, specifically in spiritual circles, that everybody, there's so many different conceptions. Some people think that everybody is the same living entity. Everybody is ultimately God, and we're all the same entity. Some people think that, that's kind of the underlying thread, basically. We're all one. But no, actually, if everybody, because some people are bewildered, we see, and other people are not bewildered. Some people are spiritually advanced, and other people are not spiritually advanced. And if everybody was bewildered, if everybody was under illusion, there would be no question of exchanging spiritual knowledge. So there are higher authorities. There is higher knowledge which we can avail of. It's obvious to us, maybe having heard it so many times. Even from the practical point of view, it's obvious that the teacher in any subject matter, he has to know more than the student. Otherwise, what's this qualification of a teacher? It doesn't make sense. The teacher isn't on the same level of the student. He'll never be. And in that way, he can elevate the student. But if the student thinks that the teacher is also illusioned, the teacher doesn't know, actually. Nobody knows just like if you're trying to learn how to cook, and somebody's trying to teach you, you're taking some culinary class. If you think the teacher, from the beginning, if you go in with a conception that this teacher's an idiot, he doesn't know what he's talking about. Actually, we're all searching after the truth of how to properly cook the dish, but nobody so far has ascertained the proper cooking technique, then you're hopeless. It has to be approached with this attitude of, just like it comes in Gita, submissive attitude, and also one of inquiry, which implies an understanding that this person knows more than me. So that's coming out here by Vidura. And then Maitreya responds. He says, just first, one other thing. Krishna says this in the Bhagavad Gita. It's the same thing. I don't know this by heart, but he says, Dvav imo parasho loke chakshara eva chakshara sarvani bhutani katasto kshara uchyate. Krishna explains to Arjuna in the 15th chapter that there are two classes of beings, the fallible and the infallible. In the material world, every living entity is fallible, and in the spiritual world, every living entity is called infallible. So some living entities are subject to mistakes. Other living entities, maybe very surprising, are not subject to mistakes. They can't commit mistakes because that's not their nature. They're spiritually perfect. They know everything, in other words. That comes elsewhere. Anyway, I'll get to that. It's in the same chapter, but I'll move on to this next translation. So Shukadeva Goswami, Vidura, he asked these questions, and then Maitreya replies. Shukadeva Goswami is here speaking. O King Maitreya, thus being agitated by the inquisitive Vidura, at first seemed astonished, but then he replied to him without hesitation, since he was fully God conscious. The word here is used choditaha, being agitated. I don't know what that means. I'm presuming it's not the sort of anger sort of agitated, more the sort of how Prabhupada is explaining the purport. It seems more like he's sort of astonished or surprised like that. He's surprised by the inquiries of Vidura. So he was surprised, but simultaneously he wasn't surprised. Srila Prabhupada explains that since Maitreya was filled with God consciousness, he had no reason to be astonished at such contradictory questions. He knew everything. I'm just seeing here. Yeah, so he began, because he was a devotee, presumably out of humility, although it's not expressly mentioned, out of humility he was expressing surprise, being surprised, or a sense of being astonished at these questions and seemingly not knowing them. This is contrasted to Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita, where immediately Krishna chastises Arjuna, and immediately he just begins his spiritual instruction, because Krishna knows. We see the humility he's God. We see the humility of the devotee, specifically Maitreya here. He acts as if he doesn't know, and then he replies. But factually he knows everything. There's a quote here, Yasmin vigyate sarvam evam vigyatam bhavati. And this is translated later in the same chapter. Srila Prabhupada, he quotes it again. This is from the Mundaka Upanishad. Srila Prabhupada says, this Vedic hymn declares emphatically that the devotee of the Lord knows everything material and spiritual in relationship with the Lord. Their direction is practical. They know everything that is and all the details of the Lord's domination over the different creations. So Maitreya, because he knew Krishna, he knew everything, all these subjects that are being discussed about how Krishna is able to, that I mentioned previously, how is it that he has no desires yet he acts, how is it that the soul that becomes entangled yet he's fully spiritual. He knew all this already, just by, not necessarily by independent study or dry study, but rather because he knew Krishna, automatically he knew everything. The example that is given there in the Gita, just by knowing the sun, automatically you become cognizant of the sun's surface, the sun's rays as well. So similarly, by knowing Krishna, one knows everything. It comes, anyway, I could search for it, but I have it here. It comes in the same chapter, in the 15th chapter of the Gita. Krishna says, Yo mam evam asamudho janati purushottamam sa sarva vid bhajati mam sarva bhavina bharata. Krishna tells Arjuna, whoever knows me as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, without doubting, is the knower of everything. He therefore engages himself in full devotional service to me, O son of Bharata. So one who knows Krishna knows everything. Krishna says here, literally, sarva vid, he knows everything. What does that mean? How does he know everything? Well, he knows everything about Krishna. Well, you could look at it at different angles. Because he knows Krishna, automatically one knows everything. Just the same thing, by knowing the sun, you know everything about the sun's rays, etc., the chemical composition of it, etc., like that. This is, the direct understanding. And it's proper. There's, so knowing everything, what does this everything mean? Srila Prabhupada writes in Gita, also as well, there's knowing everything. One thing is that, so we're hearing about Maitreya approaching Vidura, Vidura approaching Maitreya. He's doing so, and he's accepted him as a spiritual master, even if informally so. He's taking the instruction from him. Why? And what is the qualification of Maitreya? Maitreya should know everything, otherwise he shouldn't accept this position of a spiritual master. Srila Prabhupada writes here, in this similar verse, this Karpanya dosha pahata svabhavaha, Arjuna is saying to Krishna, now I'm confused about my duty and I've lost all composure. In this condition, I'm asking you to tell me for certain what is best for me. Now I am your disciple and a soul surrendered unto you. Can you pull up this verse? This is 2.7 in the Gita. And I'll just read from the purport. Yeah, the first paragraph in the purport. I think it is. Yeah, I'll just read the whole paragraph. By nature's own way, the complete system of material activities is a source of perplexity for everyone, just as it was for Vidura, or seemingly so. And at every step there is perplexity, and therefore it behooves one to approach a bona fide spiritual master, who can give one proper guidance for executing the purpose of life. All Vedic literatures advise us to approach a bona fide spiritual master to get free from the perplexities of life, which happen without our desire. They are just like a forest fire that somehow blazes without being set by anyone. Similarly, the world's situation is such that perplexities of life automatically appear without our wanting such confusion. No one wants fire, and yet it takes place, and we become perplexed. The Vedic wisdom therefore advises that in order to solve the perplexities of life and to understand the science of the solution, one must approach a spiritual master who is in the disciplic succession. A person with a bona fide spiritual master is supposed to know everything. One should not, therefore, remain in material perplexities, but should approach a spiritual master. This is the purport of this verse. So the spiritual master should know everything. So simultaneously, that person with a spiritual master, with a bona fide spiritual master, is also supposed to know everything. There's this word, I forget what the current one is. They've changed it. I think via media. The spiritual master is the transparent via media. Of what? There's transcendental, or Krishna, that's one thing, but also transcendental knowledge. The transcendental knowledge descends down, and just as the spiritual master knows everything, he has this knowledge, he imparts this knowledge to his disciple. It's natural. It's not that he withholds knowledge from the disciple. He may do so, seeing the disciple's qualification, but in the ultimate sense, he's supposed to bring the disciple up, not keep them in ignorance. Srila Prabhupada writes in the 4th canto in one purport, in criticism of mosques, synagogues, and churches, that the pastors and whatever, imams, whatever they have, their purpose, their duty, what they're simply doing is they're just keeping their congregations in ignorance. So therefore people are dissatisfied. The spiritual master is not meant to do such a thing. He's meant to elevate the disciple. He may do so gradually. Just like we see Srila Prabhupada, immediately he didn't instruct his disciples, or even after some years, for example, he didn't discuss all aspects of Krishna consciousness, because some aspects are relevant based upon one's qualification. It's not necessarily, for example, that we have to explain topics of creation for somebody who's coming new. For example, they don't have the qualification to understand. And if you explain to them, actually, it may be even, although Krishna's pastimes are all good, in a sense, it may be detrimental to them because it may be overwhelming for them, and they may go away even out of that. So there's so many different examples that could be given, but there's different qualification, and the spiritual master, he's able to judge the qualification of the disciple, what the disciple can and cannot understand, and what the disciple can and cannot do. We're also hearing that we just read, the spiritual master, he gives proper guidance for executing the purpose of life. So the spiritual master gives guidance. The purpose of life is one, to worship Krishna, but the spiritual master gives specific guidance on specific cases based upon one's own nature and also qualification I was speaking. So, anyway, more could be said about that, but I want to hit on this point that a person with a bona fide spiritual master is supposed to know everything. Actually, the property further says one should not remain in material perplexities, but should approach a spiritual master. So if one approaches a spiritual master, the natural symptom of that, if we've successfully done so, we shouldn't be bewildered. Actually, it's like that. We shouldn't be perplexed as to what to do with our lives, who we are. We shouldn't, in one sense, although there's day-to-day problems, in one sense, we shouldn't have any overarching problems in our life. Because we should know, if we've approached a bona fide spiritual master, that Krishna is in control, we're servants of Krishna, and we're to act as Krishna is directing us through the spiritual master. Of course, there may be things that come up, but the spiritual master is meant to rectify all doubts. That is his role in the guru-disciple relationship. Of course, the disciple's role is also to serve him, etc., like this. But it's not that, for example, one is feeling, one should harbor doubts in devotional service. One should harbor doubts, or one should just remain in ignorance. We see Srila Prabhupada, he was unhappy on many different occasions to see that his disciples were not studying his books, or were in general ignorant of the philosophy, even after many years. So a disciple is not meant to remain as such. A disciple, eventually, even so, he's meant to become guru, which entails assimilating this knowledge. Not just this knowledge, everything. A disciple should know everything. So what is this everything? When asked about this line in the Bhagavad Gita, that a person with a bona fide spiritual master is supposed to know everything, somebody asked Srila Prabhupada, what does that mean he's supposed to know everything? So Srila Prabhupada, he explained, this is from I'm not sure, some conversation or lecture. Srila Prabhupada says everything means whatever his guru knows, he should know. That much. Not like God, everything. Within his limit, that's all. If he tries to understand whatever his guru has said, that much is everything. Everything does not mean that we know everything like God, like Krishna. That is not possible. If he regularly chants and follows the regular principles, follows the orders of the guru, then he knows everything. That's all. Not very much. Krishna knows past, present, future, everything. You cannot expect anyone to know like Krishna, everything. So knowing everything doesn't mean you become omniscient like Krishna. That's Krishna's qualification. That's not necessarily the qualification of a guru or a disciple. Another thing is that even this, to add another qualification, within the Bhagavatam, Srila Prabhupada he writes in one place that it's not possible even for the disciple to remember everything that the spiritual master has said. The spiritual master, he'll say so many different, just like Prabhupada, there's so many different lectures of Prabhupada, looking at the same topic from different angles of vision, quoting so many, Srila Prabhupada knew so many verses. It's not possible to know all the verses that Srila Prabhupada knew. Maybe it is, but for a lay disciple, the average disciple, you can say, it's not possible to have that level of scholarship as Srila Prabhupada. But Srila Prabhupada writes, I'm paraphrasing the gist, one should assimilate the message, in other words, the core message of it. So it's not that one has to completely become omniscient or something like this. Sometimes there's an idea of this, that the guru has to, or not has to, but people think that the guru is omniscient and the guru can automatically understand the mind of the disciple, even if the disciple doesn't tell the guru. For example, or so many different things. Just like sometimes you see the disciples asking vague questions to the spiritual master as if the spiritual master is supposed to know what the disciple is going through. It may be, it may not be. We shouldn't expect like that. We shouldn't expect the spiritual master to be omniscient. Sometimes Krishna may empower such. We see many stories with Srila Prabhupada, so much so there's practically overwhelming evidence of different accounts that different disciples of Srila Prabhupada saying how they felt the sense that Srila Prabhupada knew what they were thinking, they knew what was going on in their mind. I was just hearing a few days ago, Bhardaraj Prabhu, he tells a story in his Srila Prabhupada memories that he was thinking about his name at the time of initiation. He was a bhakta, and he was going to get initiated, and he wanted the name Marana Mohana Das. So he really wanted this name. And so anyway, his time for initiation came, and so he went before Srila Prabhupada. He was thinking within his mind, please give me this name, Marana Mohan. And then he gets up there to Srila Prabhupada, and then, whatever, he goes through the whole, recites the principles, and then Srila Prabhupada, he asks his secretary, I presume Pramnuna or somebody, whoever's keeping track of the names, Srila Prabhupada asks, is there already somebody named Marana Mohan? And then the secretary replies, yes, Srila Prabhupada. And then Srila Prabhupada says, okay, your name is Bhardaraj. So it may be so. It seems mystical. We can't fully understand whether Srila Prabhupada knew or not. The relationship between the guru and the disciple is very difficult. The nature of Guru Tattva in general is difficult to understand. It's difficult. But sometimes the guru may understand, sometimes he may not understand. Krishna can provide information so far as necessary, unlimitedly so. He can, if Krishna so desires, he can make a devotee omniscient. It's just as, for example, Yamaraj is said to be omniscient. He's sarvagya. He's all-knowing. That qualification is mentioned there. But he's only like that. He has that ability only because Krishna has given it to him. Once Krishna retracts it, he's not able to. If Yamaraj is no longer Yamaraj is a post within this material world, in one sense, is a position of a demigod. So if Krishna retracts that ability, he doesn't have that ability, simply put. We see, for example, in the case of Arjuna, in the Bhagavatam, so many different things he goes through, but he says, I'm the same Gandiva bow I had, but now I was defeated by so many infidel cowherdmen. And Srila Prabhupada, he writes in the purport and Arjuna is expressing that in Krishna's absence, he's feeling like his power is gone. Srila Prabhupada writes in the purport that the Lord is all-powerful, and by his grace, his pure devotee can be as powerful as he may desire, even more so than himself, amazingly so. And there is no limit to it. And when the Lord withdraws his power from anyone, he is powerless by the will of the Lord. So, the devotee is as powerful and potent as Krishna empowers him to be. He can even do greater things than Krishna. Just as, for example, Lord Chaitanya, he preached within a limited area of India, but Srila Prabhupada, he preached all over the world. So in one sense, Srila Prabhupada, his preaching was even greater than that of Lord Chaitanya, in a sense, because he was empowered by Lord Chaitanya to do so. There's so many examples like this. Krishna empowers his pure devotee, and the pure devotee can also empower others, just like we hear in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. Lord Chaitanya, he would go to some place in India, convert people, and then those people would then go out and then convert others. So similarly too, Krishna empowers the pure devotee, and the pure devotee is able to empower others. And that empowerment comes principally not by any sort of material expertise or qualification, but principally by faith. We see, for example, Srila Prabhupada's, especially initial followers, materially they were quite destitute. They weren't all coming from horrible backgrounds necessarily so, but many of them were involved in the counterculture or living quite degraded, I guess you could say for lack of a better term, lives, involved in a quite degraded scene. But nevertheless, they were able to come out of it, quickly compose themselves, and do amazing things for Srila Prabhupada. We see, for example, Shyamasundar Prabhu, who is associated with the hippie movement in San Francisco, the original 1967 Shyamasundar Prabhu, who's quite famous. He's written those books, Chasing Rhinos. So he was associated with the hippie movement and Haight-Ashbury. If you want to know his background, he's written all about it in Chasing Rhinos. It's quite shocking in some places, but you see what he did shortly thereafter, after meeting Srila Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada's empowerment, what he did for Srila Prabhupada's movement. He did so many things. Just to name two of them. One, he organized huge pandal programs in India. He had no experience of organizing such things, but he organized programs where tens of thousands attended in Mumbai, then Bombay, by principally conducting huge advertisement campaigns. He had no experience how to do so. Another thing is he went to London and he just met George Harrison, and by that meeting, made him favorable. And then from that, so many different things came about. So George became favorable, produced records about Krishna, funded the Krishna book, Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So many things came from that. So much service Shyamasundar Prabhu was able to render by the empowerment he received from Srila Prabhupada. He opened himself up to be a conduit for his spiritual master's mercy. So there's so many different cases. Just like we hear, I'm sure, we've heard some, I think Vamshi Prabhu told this story some months ago. Brahmananda Prabhu going to the Macmillan Company and getting the Bhagavad Gita printed. The printing of Chaitanya Charitamrita is quite amazing. Chaitanya Charitamrita, there were, I don't have the number here. I forget, there are so many volumes sitting pending, and there are also volumes of the Srimad Bhagavatam 4th canto sitting pending that the disciples hadn't published. Many of them were just tapes, either manuscripts or just recordings of Srila Prabhupada's dictaphones. And the disciples, Srila Prabhupada, he ordered his disciples to produce these within 2 months, and they actually did it. The calculation is that his disciples at the time, they produced a large hardback book every 3 days for 8 weeks straight. When the book wasn't even compiled, it means like they took a recording and they produced a book like this within 3 days with art, binding, layout, editing, everything, typing the tape. That's amazing. That's like inconceivable. I mean, my own limited experience, my spiritual master has been working on this Buddha mission for Srila Prabhupada for 15 years. And the time I've been involved with it, it's taken me 2.5 years just working on it with the editing, basically, and then like proofreading like that. And they did all this in 3 days. Granted, there were mistakes, and there's still a few mistakes in the Chaitanya Charitamrita today. But nevertheless, it's a miraculous act. Shamasundar Prabhu, I'm quoting him, or his example, he said that such things came to be normal when you were around Srila Prabhupada. He said we expected magic when you're around Srila Prabhupada. And it's like that. When you're around a pure devotee of Krishna, you feel Krishna's influence. You can feel how Krishna is arranging such situations. Yeah, I want to go back to this point of knowing everything, because I have a few more points on this. So, Srila Prabhupada, I quoted one answer, one question that was asked to Srila Prabhupada. Jayadvaita, then Das, now Maharaj, he asked Srila Prabhupada an awkward question of that sometimes, so the spiritual master is supposed to know everything, but we see, for example, the spiritual master sometimes makes mistakes, sometimes he's wrong, sometimes he forgets something. So how do we understand this? It seems like he doesn't know everything. So Jayadvaita Maharaj, he asked Srila Prabhupada this question. Srila Prabhupada, he replied that yes, because if he knows that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, then he knows everything. That's all. Not that he should know like Krishna. If he accepts Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the absolute truth, then he knows everything. So the same answer. It's not that the spiritual master is necessarily omniscient. But nevertheless, he's to be taken that he knows everything because he knows Krishna. It's just like, for example, Gaura Das Babaji, he was illiterate. He was a little bit literate, otherwise he couldn't necessarily read those books of Narottam Das Thakur. But we hear, for example, it's cited, he didn't know how to write his name. So it seems like he was, from a material point, he seemed like quite ignorant or uneducated. But he knew everything. He was completely educated because he knew the essence of everything. Otherwise, why did Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, who was so scholarly, so learned, both materially and also spiritually, means like in terms of Shastra and also in terms of just material knowledge, why did he accept Gaura Das Babaji as his spiritual master? Because Gaura Das Babaji, he knew everything, and in a sense, he had superior knowledge to Bhaktisiddhanta, because the guru is always greater than the disciple. Another instance, another example that can be cited, Srila Prabhupada was once asked that, I think in New York or somewhere like that, he was once asked how many windows are there, in a challenging spirit, do you know how many windows there are in the Empire State Building? Srila Prabhupada, he replied that he gave a counter question, and he asked how much water is there in a mirage. So the implication is that the question is meaningless. In one sense, it's insignificant how much water is, just as it's insignificant to know how much water is there in a mirage. It's a mirage, it doesn't matter at all, it's an illusion. So similarly too, to know how many windows are in the Empire State Building, it's useless knowledge, it's not relevant. We're enjoined, just in the Gita, in this purport, that one should approach the spiritual master with relevant inquiries, we hear, for example. So these relevant inquiries are to be made, and these relevant inquiries are being made by Vidura to Maitreya, not these sort of extraneous sort of inquiries like that. So the spiritual master his qualification is to be learned in these things. So so here Srila Prabhupada continues that within this purport today, anyone who is the devotee of the Lord knows about the Lord to some extent, and devotional service to the Lord makes him able to know everything by the grace of the Lord. So this is the import of knowing everything, and principally by the grace of Krishna. That I've already covered. It's by Krishna's grace one is able to know these things. Even if he doesn't, even if a devotee, for example, doesn't necessarily endeavor, even for material knowledge, that knowledge can be supplied by Krishna. And he can be empowered to do so. So many different things. Anyway, I'll just cite one example. We see, for example, when they were building the Mumbai temple, Juhu temple, it's close to the beach. So whoever was involved in the construction, they were debating whether to put piles in the building. It means like deep, like foundational pillars which like anchor the building to the bedrock. Because otherwise, when it's next to the beach, the building would just wash away because it's on sand. So the disciples were in favor of putting it, but then Srila Prabhupada, he rejected. He said, no, we don't need piles. You can build the building without piles. Srila Prabhupada wasn't necessarily an architect or anything like that. He didn't have knowledge like that. But he was able to observe and they built, and actually Srila Prabhupada's disciples, they called in some sort of expert, and they made an analysis of the soil levels or whatever it is, and they concluded, actually, yes, you don't need piles. It's far enough from the shore, and the building doesn't need it. And when Srila Prabhupada was asked, how did you know that? Srila Prabhupada replied, well, I could see the other buildings in the area. They didn't have piles, so we also don't need piles. So it seems like material knowledge that Srila Prabhupada was just astute. He was observant. But also Krishna, these things are also directed by Krishna. Even minute details like this, Krishna gives his pure devotee even information, like even he may not be materially expert in some subject matter, still the understanding comes from Krishna. We see this principally in Srila Prabhupada's case. So much understanding was supplied by Krishna, even if Srila Prabhupada hadn't necessarily, for example, he wasn't necessarily, although he had experience in management, he wasn't exactly, how to say, he had not had prior experience managing a worldwide movement. For example, but these things were supplied by Krishna. Everything is supplied by Krishna. Everything can easily be supplied by Krishna, whether we have an abundance of that knowledge or a deficit of that knowledge. It can even be, we may have an abundance of material knowledge, but if we're not empowered by Krishna, we can't utilize it properly in devotional service. Sometimes that comes about. Sometimes we see people who are very expert and learned in Shastra, but because they're bereft of Krishna's mercy, they completely misunderstand Shastra. Or other people who have no knowledge of Shastra, they may not be not exactly no knowledge, but they may not be so studied in it. They can know the conclusions of Shastra by the grace of Krishna and the grace of the spiritual master. The prominent example being the Brahmana who is reading the Bhagavad Gita over here. I think it was in Sri Rangam. So that story is there, we're familiar with it. So, by the devotee knows everything, the disciple also knows everything, principally by the grace of Krishna, by empowerment, principally through faith, not any sort of material qualification. So that's kind of anyway, there's different points in this verse, but that's kind of what the purports are like dealing with. So I can end there and take any comments or questions anybody has.
So this word agitated, the analogy or the example is something similar to basically how a devotee can feel stumped when asked with very difficult questions. And sometimes we all have that experience. It's like, oh my God, he's asking me this question. How am I going to answer that? But then we also have the experience that sometimes we try to answer and then somehow, you figure it out as you answer it. Sometimes the knowledge just comes, it's like, and Krishna helps because sometimes people ask a bit complicated questions and sometimes you're like, how are you supposed to answer that? And so that's why it said that out of humility a devotee may feel that he doesn't know. And but then I've also kind of experienced that many times I sit in class and I see the other devotees speaking. I'm like, wow, there's so much knowledge. It's like, how did I could have never understood or analyzed anything like that. But I've heard the same in one sense. Some devotees also comment about the classes that, sometimes we ourselves give. Is sometimes they're like, you don't feel like you kind of would have been capable of giving all of that, but somehow or the other, you take up the task and you get a little knowledge. Of course, the knowledge is not coming from us, so we get puffed up, then we lose it all. But that's kind of how I see that agitated point. I think it's a bit relatable in some ways.
Yeah.
Because the questions that Vidura is asking are like, it's like, whoa. It's like, why is the Supreme Lord who's seated in their heart?
Yeah,
how can you prevent them? And so sometimes you're faced with that. A devotee is having a crisis of faith, and you have to try to convince them, and you have to try to bring them closer to Krishna. You don't know how exactly you're going to say or what you're going to say, and so sometimes when asked that question, sometimes you feel a little rise of heat in your body. Is a little concerning, experience. But then you kind of pray at the lotus feet of the spiritual master and Krishna, and then you speak and you hope, you're able to help that devotee.
Yeah, that's a good point. Even as specifically that point of sometimes you don't even know the proper answer, but even when speaking, sometimes it just comes about. It's a Krishna's grace. Even we see the example of Shikara Goswami. We've covered these. We were memorizing these prayers. There's a few. Prachodina yuna parasarasvati vitan vidajasasitim smritim hridi svalakshana paradurabut kilasita samayrishinam rishavapprasitatam. He says that Lord Brahma, Shikara Goswami, before reciting the Bhagavatam, he cites that Lord Brahma, he was enlightened in knowledge within the heart by Lord Krishna, basically, a simple translation. And then he says, may that Lord be pleased with me. And then he further says this verse I quote, this Bhutir Mahadbiri Mafur Vibor. He says that the Lord lies down in the material elements and basically brings life to them, enlivens them, sets them into action. So similarly, may that Lord who lies down in the material elements appear in my words and also decorate my words. Mukunda Datta Prabhu, if he hears the classes, he cites a similar verse by Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, I think, where he says that if may Gopal empower my words so that they become full of knowledge and pleasing to the devotee. Something like this, some prayer that he makes. So even Shukadeva Goswami, for example, these prayers, you can see it seems like he wasn't not fully confident, but he was looking to Krishna's mercy and to recite the Bhagavatam. He even was feeling that if Krishna doesn't appear in my words and empower them, they won't have so much of an effect. Even Srila Prabhupada, he was saying that before he came to America. There's that poetry there. If you can, yeah, exactly, yeah. If the Srimad Bhagavatam is your incarnation, and if what is that? If you so desire, yeah, it's hazy in my mind to paraphrase. If you want to bring the living entities out of illusion, you so can. So etc. like this. So yeah, it's a common trend actually, and it happens. It's very surprising. We can be surprised at what we can do in devotional service in general, speaking or anything. It's just so many things are there. People think they don't, and anything. Some people are hesitant to give class, and then they give class, and it's oh, they speak so nicely. People are hesitant to lead kirtan, then they lead kirtan. Oh, he's a very nice singer. He may not even
know that he was a singer.
Yeah, they didn't even know he was a singer. It said, for example, Agnidev Prabhu, he was a great kirtan leader. We all know him, but he wasn't necessarily involved in any sort of he would go to whatever, he would listen to music, but he wouldn't be involved in any sort of singing. And then he went to New York. He went to the temple. I think the second day he was there, they sent him out on Harinam and they had him lead kirtan, and then or maybe an arti or something like that. They had him lead kirtan. And then, the temple president or somebody said, oh, we have a kirtan leader here. He hadn't thought about that. Sometimes latent abilities in devotional service are brought out. Sometimes it's like that. Or even abilities we don't have at all. Krishna can empower us with such abilities in devotional service. It's amazing. Most of us who are in devotional service, we're doing things which we had no connection with when we were before Krishna consciousness, It's like that. So many things. We see the example in history too. Srila Prabhupada's disciple, they didn't know how to print a magazine. They didn't know how to print books. They didn't know how to sell books even. They told Srila Prabhupada, we don't know what to do with these books, but they did it. There's so many examples can be cited, but yeah, the general principle is there.
Yeah, and therefore it's also important that devotees don't get hung up on their, I have these talents, I must engage those talents or something, not get hung up on the material platform, or become too hung up about talents that they don't have and try to force it to happen. I need to be a good kirtan leader, or I need to give amazing classes, and then try to force it, and then it becomes artificial. And then actually we get smashed. But we shouldn't, and if there's a need, sometimes, okay, question, like this, we feel unqualified. Sometimes we're put in a position where someone's asking us a question, or we may have to give a little guidance or something, and we may feel unqualified, but we pray to Krishna and, we say what we know, or what we've realized, and that's it. That's the best we can do. We shouldn't shy away from trying to render service when it's needed. mean,
Yeah.
it's like, so.
Anything else? Nobody?
Hare Krishna. Yeah, this point, a person with a bona fide spiritual master is supposed to know everything.
Yeah.
So like, say that there's a disciple and he took initiation under the spiritual master. The spiritual master saying everything that Prabhupada said, but then the spiritual master falls down. Does that impede the disciple's ability to know everything because the spiritual master is not bona fide?
Not necessarily. I mean, Diksha is important, but the principal thing that's emphasized within our parampara, I was just explaining yesterday, is Shiksha, instruction. For example, I mean, there was a conversation yesterday, I think at breakfast, over, for example, Bhaktivinoda Thakur's spiritual master. So anyway, I won't get into the details of that, but the connection is still there. Because the principal thing is shiksha, instruction like that. So it's not that if there's some difficulty with a spiritual master, which is quite, at least nowadays is less prominent. Traditionally it's rare, it's just that there's been a period in the history where it's become a little prominent. But it doesn't disqualify the disciple from making spiritual advancement. Okay, that's the principal thing. He's not barred from receiving the mercy of Krishna. And it's not that he's been suddenly, Krishna has withdrawn his mercy from the disciple, for example. So, yeah, did that fully satisfy your question? Did you have another?
Well, I guess, so you're saying even if somebody doesn't have a bona fide spiritual master.
Does it impede them from understanding the
impede them
knowledge?
from having-
No, because that knowledge, yeah.
But then, like, you can say, okay, there's these Mayavadis, and they have these bogus gurus, and you can, with that same point, you can say, okay, they can still receive the mercy.
That's different because, I mean, the thing is, they come in a bona fide, I mean, the Mayavadis don't. The Mayavadis don't have a bona fide line, and so the knowledge in their line is just completely wrong from the beginning. The knowledge that's coming in that line, why is the line bogus? Because the knowledge is, well, I mean, first, they have no link with any of the four sampradayas. There's a technical point. Also, their knowledge is just completely wrong, for example. The knowledge has to come in one of the four sampradayas. So that knowledge, even if Diksha is there, main thing is Shiksha. Main thing, I mean, you can take Diksha, you can take initiation, but if you don't assimilate the instruction, then what's the use of the Diksha? You know, if you take initiation, but you don't have the knowledge that you have to restrain from, meat eating, for example, or among other things, then what's the use of your initiation? You know, you'll just go to hell by it. So, it doesn't necessarily in response to the original question, it's not that the knowledge becomes blocked up, for example, because there's a connection. The parampara is still there. That connection is there. It remains there. The connection, in one sense, is eternal. In one sense, there may be difficulties along the way. Even in the awkward situation of the spiritual master having difficulties. But Srila Prabhupada also writes that the disciple can deliver the spiritual master. He writes that in the 4th canto of the Bhagavatam in relation to Dhruva Maharaj. So if that's not possible, if the disciple becomes bereft of Krishna's mercy, for example, like that. So, yeah. Does that satisfy? Anything else? Yes.
This point that sometimes the disciple can know more information.
Sometimes,
like shlokas,
yeah.
yes,
Materially, it can, yeah.
than guru, and even not disciple. Some even Mayavadi can know more like shlokas or shastras. It depends on this. And sometimes Guru Maharaj, the spiritual master, he cannot exhibit his real potency. Like Srila Prabhupada can show his potency when devoted for 2 months printing this as 18 books or something like this. But previously Srila Prabhupada even cannot have even one disciple in India till 69 years old, and only after when he came, after a few years, few disciples came and starting movement or something. It's according to place and circumstances, and when it's really need to be shown, he can exhibit his power. It's not doesn't mean if that moment he cannot show this his powers, don't have this power. Sometimes like devotees can be bewildered, like why our spiritual master cannot show like this is his real potency. Maybe he's not like maybe he don't have this potency. Like in Srila Prabhupada days, the devotees they can go for book distribution or Harinam Sankirtan for 10 hours, 12 hours daily, and they're going for like even our spiritual master also told about in Oxford Street they do like in London. They starting from morning after breakfast, they do one side and go back, take a lunch, and again one side and go back. It's mean like from morning till evening. It's like every day. But if someone will go now for 10 hours, it's like he's a superhero. No, really like once a month you can go for 10 hours. No, really. But previously devotees did this. This means the qualification of disciples also is very important here.
Yeah, thank you. Those are good points. Yeah, the spiritual master, except he will sometimes withhold like that and won't show. I mean, a very obvious thing is that. I mean, if you see, for example, the case of Srila Prabhupada, taking a practical thing, is that he's a resident of the spiritual world. I mean, he writes somewhere that even if a pure devotee doesn't have any desires other than to engage in devotional service, but even if he so has a desire, Krishna immediately fulfills it. So it's not that Srila Prabhupada like is limited, for example, in any like sense of the term, but he may, for the sake of the disciple, to our vision, it may appear like that, like his. How to say? Yeah, basically just what you've said, more or less, just reiterating. Yeah. So
it's an interesting point also when Srila Prabhupada, before his disappearance, he told that my only mistake I accept so many
disciples.
Yeah. And recently we heard the Guru Maharaj lectures about why Bhaktivedanta Saraswati Thakur went so early or something like this. And he told also like because I have so many Kanishta disciples. This looks like also the Mahabhagavad they make mistakes. No, why accept so many disciples and why so many Kanishta disciples? But it's like this.
Anything else? No? Women? Mataji? What is that? Who? Oh yeah, you can. Okay, well you just want to.
So sometimes devotees could be completely convinced of the process, and they may come to realize that they may have to change their lifestyle in a way, but that could be quite overwhelming. Because you spoke about being overwhelmed in class, and it could be quite overwhelming to have to come to terms with having to change. So how could you what would you say to somebody in a situation like that?
Reiterate that first part. What people can be overwhelmed. What was the first part of the question?
But they're completely convinced about the process,
Yeah, overwhelmed by such a change.
Right.
Yeah. What to do with it? How to go through with it? Well, general advice, which is always not so palatable, is just. Well, it depends. It's a broad question. But if we know something is proper, then we should do it, in other words. I mean, if it's beneficial, principal thing is that we accept what's favorable and reject what's unfavorable. So if something is favorable for our Krishna consciousness, even if it's overwhelming or we should accept it, but we have to be practical too. We can do step by step. It's just like, for example, when we bring people into Krishna consciousness, we step by step introduce things. We don't immediately expect somebody to come to the platform for Reg 16 rounds, but we gradually introduce it because otherwise people will become overwhelmed. So sometimes we can do things gradually. Sometimes we have the luxury of doing that. Other things we're not able to do so gradually. It's like some people want to move into the temple, for example. There's no in between. There's no like gray area. You're either in like in the ashram or you're out of the ashram. There's a very black and white situation. So that can be quite an overwhelming situation. Somebody moving in for the first time. One thing is to just pray to Krishna, expect His mercy. That's the general advice. I know myself when I first joined Brahmachari ashram. It was quite overwhelming because it was quite a cultural shock for me. But I just like went through it, and that overwhelming, that sense, it just gradually you become accustomed to it. Just like in anything, when you begin anything, I mean, when you do something new, anything for the first time, even materially, generally we get overwhelmed. It's just like, we cook for the first time, we feel overwhelmed. You have to make like a chance, and there's so many things that get burned so quickly, and often new cooks do burn it so quickly. You get overwhelmed, and you don't want to cook. But then you do it maybe like 10 more. You just stick. It's not that you give up cooking, or it's not that you just like renounce it or go back to the whatever state you were in before. You just continue with it, and then you adjust to the situation. In India, you see Indians, they have this thing, you just adjust. So you adjust yourself to the situation. You tolerate, and then being overwhelmed, that feeling comes when you're shifting to a new situation. So when you become established in that new situation, after some time, there will be difficulty, undoubtedly. It's just, but after time, you just get used to it like that. You just stick it out. It's just like my spiritual master. He cites his own example of how many disciples of Srila Prabhupada went to India and they got overwhelmed by it. We have an instance of a GBC. Somebody went to India to take the role of the GBC of all of India during Srila Prabhupada's time. He didn't last a week. Many people were like that. We have others who landed in Kolkata and they were on the way going to Mayapur, and they just had the cab turn around and go back to the airport, and they just flew back to where they were. So sometimes people we even had experience of that. Somebody got over, anyway, it's like that. But you just stick it out. It's overwhelming, there can be sensory overload in situations like that, but just stick it out with the faith that Krishna will help. If we're entering into a situation that is ultimately favorable for Krishna consciousness, pray to Krishna for help. He will help, and we'll become adjusted to the situation. It won't be perfect. It's just like my spiritual master. It's still the same example. So I was citing, sorry, I didn't finish. So many left India. He stayed in India, but he also relayed that it wasn't easy. It's hot. There's so many mosquitoes. When you get sick in India, it's like you get sick 10 times more than you get in America. But you get over it. Sickness is sickness. You're horribly sick for a few days, then you get over it. Okay, there's the terrible summer, but then it goes away, and then it's fine. So like that in any situation. So he stuck it out, and there's still difficulties. There's not that, it became not hot in India, for example. It's not that he doesn't have to tolerate the heat of India still, but he just adjusted to the situation. Mainly it's a mental thing, actually. A lot of the issues in Krishna consciousness in general we deal with is like a mental thing. So we just have to sort of placate the mind and sort of keep it down. And principal thing, which I find helps, is the mind will agitate us with, how to say, it will accept and reject. It will say, I want to do this, I don't want to do this. I don't want to be in this situation. Oh, I do want to be in this situation. But we should have, as the pure soul, as the soul who has, as an aid de camp or intelligence, we should make a decision on the level of intelligence that I'm going to transition to this situation, go to this situation. We should analyze it. Is it favorable for Krishna consciousness? Make a decision and stick with it. And then don't be disturbed. The mind will disturb you still. It will still may give thoughts here and there, but don't let those thoughts disturb you. Stick to your decision like that. So it's a sort of vague question, but it's sort of the best I can I hope that helps. Okay? Yes.
Like he was saying, you can give some gradual way. Of course, when one joins the ashram, it's kind of black and white. But even within the ashram, special adjustments are made for those who are new. We don't.
Mm-hmm.
Even those who join the ashram at first, it's not like the first day that you must chant 16 rounds or you're out. Generally, as long as they're improving,
Mm-hmm.
it's okay. And you can see Chandanacharya cuts a little slack, lets them sleep during japa period or something like that, or sometimes he spends time talking to them at hours that we generally don't talk and in the ashram. But then the sincerity of the candidate is seen when they take up the guidance that's being given, and Krishna will give us the intelligence how to give guidance. Like the same example that you were giving of someone who we had experience of becoming overwhelmed and coming to India. Specifically told him, just go on Harinam, just relish the holy name, you're in the Dham, you'll experience the mercy, and Krishna will give you the mercy. He didn't listen. All he had to do was just go on Harinam. He decided to go on a walk in the city, you know. So when people are like that, it's very difficult to help them. Because even within that overwhelming circumstance, there is a certain advice that's given to them, which is clearly something that they can digest and, you know, do. But if they refuse that in the excuse of becoming overwhelmed, then it becomes very difficult because they're not willing to take shelter or guidance. And now we see that particular individual is in a pretty sorry state in his life. What to do? It's difficult to help people who don't want to be helped. And yeah, it's sad. It's hard. It's painful. But the lesson we can learn from this is that there has to be some, like you said, it's mental. You have to push through a little bit. But we can also understand that help is being given, both by devotees and from Krishna. We all have experience of that.
Another thing I'll just add to this, which is kind of like piggyback on what Vishnu Chittapur was saying, is that this point of taking guidance, just as in one sense, the material world, all the pleasures are just as like chewing the chewed. It was like we've experienced these pleasures time and time again. So similarly too, the material world is full of problems that are just happening over and over again. And our problems are not unique, although to us it seems like very fantastic. But there's so many people who have gone through the same situation and dealt with the same problems, and there's already solutions that they can offer. So, with so many different things, just like, you know, like, for example, growing things in Georgia. All right, what things can we grow here? Well, it's not that we have to figure it out. It's not that people weren't living in Georgia hundreds of years ago. We already know what can grow here, for example. We just see what they grew like in the past, and we just do it like that. What solutions they arrived. It's not that people, for example, weren't building houses without air conditioning before. They figured out how to build houses without AC and make it cool at the same time. There's the science there. So, with anything, it's good to, I don't know the specific situation, but it's good to also see, of course, spiritual authorities are there. They can guide us. Spiritual masters can guide us. And also devotees who have been in similar circumstances, who have practical experience, that I was there and I got out of it. What did I do in such a situation? You can see. You can consult them and see, and you can see their experience. Also, it's just inspiring to see such a situation like that. I know, like, for example, anyway, so many things. Like, it's inspiring to see the examples of devotees who have been through the same circumstances and they came out the other side. And then it's like, okay, well, it's possible, you know? So, like that. That's another very important thing, this aspect of taking guidance and not trying to. Every situation is also unique in some degree, but to a large part, it can be alleviated or understood by taking guidance like that. So, okay? Anything else? No. You had something more you wanted to add to that?
Oh, well, one thing is, of course, I mean, it's just understood, but I thought I'd just state it explicitly, is that even when, like Prabhupada, devotees say they made mistake, Mahabhagavata made mistake, it's just, it's taken as their great compassion and humility. It's kind of implicit, understood amongst devotees, but I thought I'd just state it for the record.
Yeah. One other thing, we have a bunch of hands now. I'll just mention something quick. We have the example, that famous conversation, Prabhupada and Vishnu John saying that, so Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he was lamenting that he didn't finish his work. It's not that he couldn't have finished it, he chose not to do so. So along the same lines as that. Yes.
Her question got me thinking. So I've read, I think it was in the Transcendental Diary, Prabhupada said, like, they kind of asked him, like, how many times can you, like, fall down or break a particular regulation. He gives like a number, like 4 times or something.
3 times.
3 times, but clearly, like, some of his disciples like left the movement altogether, and God knows what they did, but he would take them back as if nothing ever happened and pick them right back up. Yeah. So it doesn't seem like.
He said that, but he was always so strict about it. If somebody was sincerely repented, he accepted them again.
Mm-hmm. So like, we wouldn't be doing a disservice to an initiated devotee if we also tried to like bring them back up to a standard, but tell them to start where they're able to. Like if they give up 16 rounds, they're doing like 2 rounds,
It's better than
And,
nothing.
you're
Yeah.
like, yeah, do 6 rounds or something, but like, you're not doing a disservice that you're literally committing an offense to the guru. This is
Yeah,
ridiculous.
better not to act like that. It's
Okay.
just like when somebody breaks their leg, you can't expect them to go from like, in the process, there's a process of healing sometimes. It's not always the case. I mean, specifically the 16 rounds. I mean, they should come to that standard. It may take them time, again, having come to, just like when people involved, I mean, before Krishna consciousness, it took many of us time to come to the platform of chanting 16 rounds. So if somebody plunges themselves back into that situation, it will take them time, again, to become purified like that. Their purification is there. They haven't lost progress in Krishna consciousness, but it will take them time. We should be patient like that. Otherwise, if we go on the trip of just, you're offensive, you're not chanting 16 rounds, but they're trying to improve, that attitude of trying to improve is there. That's the main thing. So, okay. There's something over there you still have? Okay, I can take that quickly, then we can end.
So the point that Vishnu Prabhu made me think of something that I had been thinking about for some time. So it wasn't until recently that I had heard that the point that Prabhupada, and then I read it for myself and it became clear, but anyways, that Prabhupada was saying how the reason why he wants to reinstitute Varnashram Dharma is because his disciples keep falling down. And so the way that I was hearing it explained in a class one time, some years ago, that made me confused was it seemed like they were alluding to the fact that Prabhupada made a mistake. So how to understand Prabhupada's statement about how initially, seeming like he changed his agenda because he saw that it wasn't working.
Yeah.
And how to understand that, he doesn't actually make mistakes.
Well, he was making experience. Srila Prabhupada, he himself said, I was trying something new. I mean, his whole Western preaching was a big experiment and so many different, because he did, Krishna gave him intelligence, but practically it's not like he had been to America before. And there's so many, it's not necessarily that Srila Prabhupada, because he didn't know the situation that will come about, he made a mistake. He was always adaptable, and that adaptability was why he succeeded, actually. There's so many things can be cited. One, Srila Prabhupada initially encouraged devotees, disciples to get married, but then he saw the marriages were failing. Then he flipped his stance, and then he encouraged his disciples to remain brahmachari and take sannyas. So it was a complete 180, because he could understand the circumstances. He could see how things were progressing. And it's not necessarily, specifically with this Varnashram Dharma thing, it's not necessarily Srila Prabhupada's mistake that his disciples started falling down. That's the fault of the disciple. It's not a fault of Srila Prabhupada or what he gave or anything like that. It's a mistake on part of the disciple. Same thing I was deciding, this issue with the marriages is not that it's a mistake on the disciples' part. So if there's any sort of mistake and that can be analyzed in such a situation, the mistake is on the behalf of the disciple, not on behalf of Srila Prabhupada. Rather, Srila Prabhupada is glorious for having tolerated that and then adjusted to accommodate his disciples and continue to engage them like that. So, like that. Is it okay? Okay. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai.